Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. So order, please. This is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. My name is Susan LeBlanc, and I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm the MLA for Dartmouth North, and my pronouns are she, her. Before we begin, just want to remind you to put your phones on silent, please, and if there is a need to leave the building, we'll exit through the Granville Street doors and gather at the Art Gallery courtyard. So I'd like to ask the members to introduce themselves, please, stating your name and your constituency and your pronouns, please. And I will begin with the member on my left.
Good morning, everyone. Marco McLeod, MLA Pictou West, he, him.
Good morning, Brian Wong, MLA Waverly Fall River Beaverbank, he, him.
Good morning, Tom Taggart, MLA for Colchester North, the MLA Taggart or Tom.
Good morning, Tim Mouthett, MLA Bedford Basin, he, him, or Tim.
Lena Hamid, MLA for Fairview Clayton Park. My pronouns are she, her.
Ian Rankin, Timberley Prospect, he, him.
Thank you. And we do have a lot of background noise today, so for those of us who are losing our hearing at an alarming rate, please speak close to your microphones and clearly. I'd also like to say that we have officials from the Auditor General's office here, Legislative Council office, and the Legislative Committee office are all in attendance. And today on the agenda, we have officials with us from the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage regarding government grants and subsidies for festivals and community events. So I'd like to ask our witnesses to introduce themselves, please, with your names and your pronouns.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Shore. I'm the Deputy Minister, Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. My pronouns are he, him.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Jeffries, Executive Director of the Culture and Heritage Development Division with CCTH. My pronouns are she, her.
Great, thank you very much and welcome. And I will invite Deputy Shore to make some opening remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about our funding for our festivals and community events today, and the impact that investment has across Nova Scotia and for all Nova Scotians. At CCTH, we recognize that events are powerful tools for building stronger communities, supporting the tourism sector, and growing our economy. Each year, we support festivals and events of all sizes, from local gatherings to international forums. We work closely with organizers and cultural committees and other partners to help these events succeed. Our approach is guided by both our event strategy and our tourism strategy. This ensures that the long-term benefits to Nova Scotians and not just the ones that are one-time kind of single events. And this morning, I'd like to focus on three core impact areas of this work: the economic development, tourism growth, and community well-being. First of all, festivals and events grow our economy. Events are economic engines. They generate new spending at local restaurants, shops, and accommodations. They support jobs in production services, transportation, media, and other areas. And they provide platforms for musicians, artists, actors, and other creatives to generate income. A great example of this comes from last year's Nova Scotia Stampede. With support from our major events hosting program, this new initiative brought professional rodeo to Bible Hill, drawing more than 19,000 attendees, generating $2.2 million in net economic activity for our province. Infrastructure investment is another way that we maximize the long-term impact of events. For example, buildings to host the 2011 Canada Games boosted our GDP and left behind a legacy that will benefit Nova Scotians for years to come. We also support new infrastructure that's designed to serve the existing needs of communities while increasing their capacity to attract and host events. For instance, we provided $3 million to the Sydney Curling Club for a new facility that can welcome more members and host major tournaments and draw visitors from across the country. This brings me to the second impact. Festivals and events support our tourism industry. Last year, Nova Scotia welcomed 2 million visitors and saw $3.5 billion in tourism revenues. Events give people reasons to travel. They help extend our tourism season beyond the summer months. Events like the Downtown Dartmouth Ice Festival, the U19 Rugby Canada Nationals, the Congrès Mondial Acadien, and Standfest have spread the benefits of tourism across more regions and through more seasons. We also help events reach a wider audience through our tourism marketing initiatives. For example, we work with organizers to capture content for their events that we use in our tourism campaigns. We also offer programs that help event organizers understand what appeals to travelers and enhance their digital skills. Overall, our approach aligns with the broader goal of positioning Nova Scotia as a premier destination for cultural, sporting, and community experiences. And the third impact that I'd like to speak about today is that festivals and events improve our community well-being. According to our culture survey, 2/3 of Nova Scotians attended a festival or an event this past year. When asked why, people pointed to more than just entertainment. They said they go to support their community. They feel connected. They improve their well-being. Events foster inclusion, they celebrate culture, and they strengthen bonds. They also help preserve cultural identities, from Mi'kmaq powwows to Gaelic youth gatherings and events organized by African Nova Scotian community, Acadian, and newcomer communities. Our programs reflect that diversity. Last year, we supported more than 80 events through our festivals and community events program alone. Some are new, others have been around for generations, but each plays a role in building a more vibrant, inclusive, and prosperous Nova Scotia. In closing, our goal as a department is to support festivals and community events that matter to Nova Scotians, and to do so in a way that delivers tangible results, stronger communities, thriving tourism, and economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Shore. I think we will open it up to questions. So in this committee, we go caucus by caucus, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and then we'll see how much time we have at the end of that and go for a second round. And we'll begin with the NDP Caucus for 20 minutes. And so I will recognize MLA Hammond, please.
Thank you. We can all agree that festivals and community events obviously play a huge role in our province in terms of bringing people together, building the economy, and so on. But how can you let us know how success is measured when these investments are made? What outcomes are you looking for? What metrics are being used to assess those outcomes, and what funding is given?
Deputy Shore.
Thank you for the question. That's a great question. So there are a number of different programs that exist at CCTH in terms of support for the kind of activity that you're talking about. And sometimes the approach is a little bit different depending on the size of the festival or the activity. But I'll start a little bit with our major hosted events program, which is a program that's part of our events division. We take, first and foremost, what we do, so that's trying to attract large-scale events to the province. And there, what's very important is we need to know that if we're going to be investing in such events, that there needs to be, first and foremost, an economic return. So what we do is we generate a kind of economic impact statement. We can, from past events and from events when they take place in other areas, we know approximately how much money can come into the province if we attract that event. So the economic impact is very, very important. That's all part of an event strategy that we have in place that we use to kind of guide decision making. So on top of the economic impact, we would also look at how many people we think, how many jobs might be created. We look at the numbers of volunteers, because volunteerism is an important part of that. And we do look at what is the kind of the sort of the cultural impact that that event might have. So that's sort of how we do it for the large ones. For the ones that are a little bit smaller and kind of more recurring, I made reference in my opening remarks to the festivals and events program, which is a program that we run every year that supports kind of smaller events right across the province. And again, in that circumstance, it's application-based, so those festivals come into us with an application. They're fully evaluated by our team. We take a look at the ability of the organization to carry out the event, if there's a history, if they've done it before. We take a look at the plan that's been executed, that they present to us, all aspects of the plan. Have they taken into account, all the elements of hosting a live event? And we kind of rank them and then provide support depending on how much they've asked. There's a cap to that event. It's $10,000 in that case, but and we do that evaluation. So any event that comes to us, large or small, there are different kind of rubrics that we use to look at the evaluation of that event and look at the outcome. And at the end of the day, we do economic impact studies at the end, at the tail end. Not for every small event, certainly for the large ones, but we do ask for final reports on every bit of funding that comes out the door so that we know how many volunteers were engaged, how many people attended, those kinds of metrics.
MLA Hammond?
Thank you. So in terms of those decisions that are being made about funding, in the list of events that received funding from the department in 22-23, there are some differences in terms of the amounts community groups requested and the amount that government provided. So I'm hoping you can shed some light on, for example, the Mi'kmaq Circle of Hope Society requested $10,000 for Indigenous Women Celebration and received $6,000, while the North End Business Association requested $10,000 for the Gottingen Festival and received $3,000. Can you walk us through how the department decides to give lesser amounts than what a community group requests, and what sort of decision making is made?
Deputy Shore?
Thanks for the question. I'll start, and then I'm going to hand it to my colleague Susan to give you a little bit more detail about that, because the program is actually in her area. Typically, as I mentioned before, in some of our programs, there are always usually there are maximum amounts that organizations can ask for. I mentioned the Festivals and Events program, for instance, has a $10,000 cap. We get a high volume of applications for that, and typically when most people or organizations apply, they usually apply, not always, but they usually apply for the maximum amount that they think they can access. We do, as I mentioned, a pretty thorough evaluation of the application itself, because there are criteria and guidelines that say here are the pieces that we want to see you have in place. And typically, we take a look and evaluate every application that we receive quite thoroughly, and then try and come up with an amount that we feel kind of reflects the application itself. But for more detail, I'm going to hand it to Susan just to give you a little bit more detail about that.
Ms. Jeffries?
Hi, thanks for that, Chris. Just to elaborate a little bit more, the specific festivals that you mentioned, I wouldn't have the details with me, but around the decision-making with those particular applications. But in a lot of the cases with the festival event program, as well as other programs in the department, we often get ourselves in a position where demand exceeds resources. So decisions need to be made on the allocation of funding in a way that is providing for a variety of festivals to be funded geographically, level of application, the level of requests that they ask for sometimes includes elements of their proposal that might be an ineligible cost. So they might have applied for something that that particular program doesn't cover the cost of. It could be, in some cases, a matter of we have a threshold as to what percentage of funding we can provide versus their overall budget, because it could be perhaps that they've exceeded that threshold. But in any cases, we do work within the budget that we have for the program, and we do know that over the years, the festival event program has grown in popularity. We've addressed that by increasing the budget year over year since 2022. In fact, this year, the budget for 2025 is $350,000. So that's almost a 220% increase over 2022. So we've taken some actions to see if we can free up more money to fund more festivals. But even having said that, I can tell you in our current year, which the festival and event program is still under an assessment, but we received 187 applications to that program asking for $1.25 million in support to a $350,000. So that's an easy math to look at to understand the challenges we have. But having said that, the festival event program is only one program in the department. When we're looking at the intake for that particular program, we work with other divisions in our department that support festivals as well to understand either A, if there's an opportunity within another program to support that particular festival. In a lot of cases, that does happen, and vice versa. And so it is a matter of just trying to provide as much support as we can in the community, knowing the constraints we have. But every year we go through an evaluation of our programs and to understand the impact they're having and whether the funds we make available are enough. So this year we're pretty excited to be able to have increased that budget for festival and events. So we hope that that will have a greater impact to the applications we've had come in so far this year.
Emily Hammond?
Thank you very much for that. So the two of the three things that you mentioned, economic development and community connection, just something I want to try and bring together in the next question. So when the department weighs the potential economic benefits, such as increased tourism and foot traffic at local businesses, with social benefits, such as creating a sense of belonging and pride, how do those weigh in terms of when the decisions are made? Does one take greater priority over another? If you can elaborate a little bit on that, please.
Deputy Minister Shore?
I think, as I mentioned before, it depends a little bit on the nature of the event itself. As I made reference earlier when I spoke about the sort of major event piece, sort of like a large-scale event. You know, I made reference to the Stampede in my opening remarks. So something along the lines of a Stampede, or you know, there's the World Junior Hockey Championships that were here a couple of years ago that was highly successful. There was the Sail GP, which was in the harbor, which is coming back. These large-scale ones, there's probably a little bit more of an emphasis put on the economic impact and the tourism aspect of it, because we know that those large-scale events are major tourism attractors. People come for that. So like that's the motivator. When we look at the smaller events, the ones that Susan had been referencing to, you know, and they have them across the province. There's probably less of an emphasis for us on economic impact. It's not like we're looking really strongly at what those economic impact numbers are, although we want them to be positive. We do look at, well, how long has this event been going on for, and how long and how many people come out to it, and how many years has it been happening? And so there's really, that's where the kind of community well-being side of it comes into it. And especially for events that have a long-term, that have been around for a long time. I think of, this is just a personal one, we happen to have spend time in Pictou every summer, and there's the Pictou Lobster Carnival, and I know that that's been going on for years and years and years, and we used to bring our kids to it, and the whole community comes out, and it's a very big thing. There's not, you know, when you look at dollars and cents, there's not a lot of money that's invested in that on our behalf, but it's an important piece. So I think that's it really depends on the nature of the event itself. I will say as well, I just want to add in that it's not just about events that have a long-term history of being here in Nova Scotia. There are a number of programs that we have that are aimed at newcomer communities, and there are grants for those kinds of celebrations, and we're very, you know, we take that very seriously. We really think that it's important that people need to express their culture, express it in a positive, safe way, and provide funding to allow them to do that. So we have two programs that kind of support predominantly equity-seeking organizations.
MLA Hamid?
Thank you very much for that, and answered another question through that answer, so thank you very much. So understanding that organizations don't always have capacity to go over these applications themselves, some of them could be lengthy, or just, again, organizations might not have manpower or mental capacity even to look at that. So does the department support community groups through the application stage as well? And if so, what does that look like?
Ms. Jeffries?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. It's the work that we do in the community is actually a big part about encouraging applicants to come into the programs. So it doesn't just exist within my division. So in my division, Culture and Heritage Development, we do have responsibility for major event hosting and support for festival events. But as I mentioned earlier, we support festivals across many programs in the department. And so our department consists of, we have regional representation across the province through community sport and recreation. And they're what you would call boots on the ground. They're there for the community. They know their communities well, and they're often the first point of contact when someone is interested in applying to any program in the department. And they're there to help guide a new applicant to one of our programs. But by design as well, we went through a pretty thorough program improvement process in the last 2 years, which one of the priority of that is to identify barriers to applicants coming into our programs, and new applicants or organizations that aren't overly resourced or new or volunteer run. We identified them as in need of further support to help them understand what programs they could apply to and how to. So we spent a lot of time consulting with communities. We also work with other sector organizations in the province that might represent arts and culture, and they also are a resource for organizations to come to get advice on what programs to apply for. And I think I could say, if I may, on behalf of MLAs here, I know their MLA offices often field a lot of calls for applicants to understand what programs to come to. We also developed a tool 2 years ago called the Grant Finder tool, and it's a very intuitive tool that would help anyone who's looking for an application or funding to guide them through a series of questions to understand where they should go, what program to apply for, and how to apply. But ultimately, if an application comes in and they're not successful, we are also available to help after the fact, after a program deadline has passed, it's been assessed, and if it's not funded, we absolutely meet with whoever would like us to meet with them to talk about how they could make their application better, or any reasons for it might not have been successful. So we spent a lot of time outside of the grant administration side having those conversations.
MLA Hamid?
Thank you very much for that. So switching gears a little bit, obviously the festivals bring joy, they bring connect our communities, but it could be hard for folks to really enjoy those events when they might not know where their next meal is coming from. So can you tell us the total amount that the department has dedicated to the Community Food Access and Literacy Grant Program this year, and how does it compare to the previous year?
Deputy Shore?
Yeah, so there are two components to the Food Act. So we have an investment of $1.2 million a year at CCTH for food access grants. There are two kind of components of those grants. There's the food access and literacy, and then there's some support for there's some mobile food markets and farmers markets and direct support in those areas. Certainly, we maximize those grants. The amount of money that we put in at food security is a really serious issue. Those grants, in of itself, a lot of them, well, two of them are, one of them, sorry, in particular, is geared at really education, because it's really trying to educate people about what is healthy eating and providing, and the other side of that is trying to provide access to healthy sources of food. We know that it's a very serious issue in Nova Scotia today. It's one of the reasons why we have those grants, and certainly something that we take quite seriously. We also work with our colleagues in other departments to address food insecurity and food safety.
MLA Hamid with 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. So we've heard from folks administering food security programs who have been told by the department that there wasn't money in the budget to increase in grant funding this year. Can you tell us how many applicants received less than what they requested when it comes to the community food access and literacy grants?
Deputy Shore.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I don't have I'll follow up with you on that. I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but I can certainly follow up and provide that information afterwards for sure. Yeah.
MLA Hamid, please.
Thank you. So, you know, as we all can see, all signs are pointing to greater food insecurity in the province. Statistics Canada shows that the price of food is up nearly 23%, and Feed Nova Scotia reports that food bank usage is up 68%. Is the department looking to expand the food security programs or the funding for them?
Deputy Shore with about a minute.
At this point, the budget for this year is the same as it was in previous years. As I said before, we are always looking at ways to kind of maximize the dollars that we have and make sure that they're having the greatest impact. I can tell you that outside of the funding envelope, because the funding envelope currently is what it is, I do work with my deputy colleagues to have conversations about how we can address the issue and what we can do, especially moving forward. So I've had numerous conversations with other deputy ministers about addressing this issue and seeing how we can work together to address it, perhaps be a little bit more efficient in how we offer grants, and to a degree a little creative in terms of how we can address this really serious problem.
Order, please. The time for the NDP caucus has elapsed, so we'll move on to the Liberal caucus, and I will recognize MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. And thanks for being here. And my colleague makes some excellent points around food insecurity, which I'll touch on a little bit. But I'll ask a general question about what you're hearing from grant recipients in terms of the biggest challenges they face. Like one of the biggest challenges that I certainly hear related to food insecurity, but is really around long-term predictability of funding, multi-year terms. So maybe if you could elaborate on what the biggest challenges that organizations are facing in terms of grant acquisitions.
Deputy Shore.
Thank you for the question. It's a really good question. When you take a look, I made reference earlier to the number of programs that we have that support festivals and events and community events. I think the list that we provided to you, so at CCTH we have 77 grant programs. Of the 77, about 44 of them are sort of outward-facing application-based ones. In terms of the grants, the funding available for festivals and community events, there are 29 different grant programs that people can apply to. Largely, when you look at it from a kind of high level, there are two fundamental kinds of grants that we provide to people. One is called an operating grant, which really is year to year. It's an amount that an organization that is well established and kind of provides a very predictable outcome every sort of year, like a activity, I should say. And then there are project-based grants. So these are grants that are typically a little bit smaller. Projects for us are events or festivals that really have a kind of beginning, middle, and end. They happen at one time in the year. They happen for a short period of time. And the activity of the organization is not really year-round. For the most part, the event is there. It gets executed. You know, they ramp up to it. They execute it. They ramp it down. In terms of operating support, that's really geared to organizations that have a greater impact in terms of their community. So I'll give you, for example, the Celtic Colours Festival in Cape Breton. There's a great example of a highly successful month-long, Celtic festival. It operates year-round. It has some significant staff.
we give them operating funding to execute that festival. Other examples would be Standfest, the Jazz Festival. There's lots of examples here. Those types of applications, because technically the amount of money that we give them is a little bit higher, and because it's year over year, we need to know there's a high level of accountability that needs to be there on our part and transparency. So the application is a little bit more complex. It requires more reporting. It's a little bit more onerous. But typically those organizations are bigger. They have professional staff. They have experience doing that. They don't get to the point of receiving operating without having gone through project funding to begin with. So it's kind of an evolution. For project-based grants, it's simpler. The application is not as complex. We still have accountability. There still needs to be transparency and final reports. But usually they're a little bit simpler in terms of the application process. At the end of the day, we are trying to streamline those applications as best we can. We're trying to create the balance between, is it overly onerous to fill this out? We don't want that to be the case, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're making good investments and making good use of public funds. So I would say that probably the biggest challenge that we sometimes hear, the two challenges are the applications are complicated, and then the other side of it is, of course, always relates to resource. There's usually never, as Susan made reference to earlier, we get way more applications than we have resources, so that's always a challenge as well.
MLA Rankin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you are bringing up a point that I want to extrapolate a little bit, because I think that is what we're seeing is 77 different grants in your department alone. And there's multiple departments that have grants mishmashed all over the place. And it really is difficult for organizations. And I'll give a worst case scenario that's not in your department, but I've heard of a grant not being sent on time. It's a manual process, and that organization was not able to make payroll. So there could be significant ramifications. And another example we talked about it yesterday with core funding for intimate partner violence, and how organizations are trying to find the best of the best employees in a competitive workplace. And without predictable long-term funding, it's hard for them to find employees to sign on for a year at a time, or even 2 or 3 years at a time. And so I wonder if other provinces are looking at, if there is a best practice model out there where we can actually have a more streamlined, to use your words, approach to finding core funding, ideally for a lot of these organizations and grants, and not have as much arbitrary decision making on all these different grant programs that are in 77 different grant programs, 44 different applications, most of it manual, a lot of red tape. What are we looking at in terms of, is there a model out there that we can strive towards to streamlining and making it a lot more evidence-based and predictable?
Deputy Minister Shore.
Thank you for that question. It's a really good one, and a timely question, because I think one of the things that, I completely understand, that is a lot of grant programs. I can tell you that they are designed that way because they address very specific needs, and at some point, there can be a kind of a general approach to certain amounts of information. But when you get into a specific action, there are always going to be specific questions that need to be addressed. And that's the history of why we develop a program for a specific reason in an area. However, that being said, I think your point is very well made. We, in the department, in fact, all departments right now are looking at how do we improve productivity and efficiency. It's a very, very big part of what we've been asked to address recently by the Premier. And we take it very seriously. And we are engaged right now in activities in and around looking at how do we streamline these processes? How do we make them more efficient? Are there areas where things perhaps are repetitive and we don't need to be asking people the same questions over and over again. And so we're actually engaged in that work right now. We're looking at what ways to simplify. The grant finder tool that Susan made reference to that we stood up 2 years ago was an effort to do that. Really to allow a tool to the general public that they can use to efficiently find what they're looking for. But we're continuing that work. So we are engaged right now in trying to find ways to make it more like ease of access, especially for the Nova Scotia public. As far as I know, in terms of other jurisdictions, we're all more or less in the same boat. I don't know of any. We do jurisdictional scans all the time, and I'm not aware of any other province that's doing it that much differently than how we're doing it. But I know that we're very strongly dedicated to finding a way to make it a little bit more manageable for people.
MLA Rankin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to highlight a real-time example, and this touches on the point the member for Fairview-Clayton Park mentioned around food insecurity, and specific to the Nourishing Communities program that supports the economy with local markets, supports public health because it's healthy food oriented, and supports food insecurity. And in 2024, the program received more than $600,000 from your department, but yet in 2025 that funding was reduced. So I asked about this, and the Farmers Market Association had asked for an increase in funding for this program. Can the department say whether this increase was accepted? I know the minister had met with the group. Was that accepted, and why was the funding reduced for 2025?
Deputy Minister Shore?
Thanks for the question. Again, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. We support the farmers market and with funding through the food security grants. But in terms of the details of that specific, why those decisions were made, I don't have that information with me now. But I'm happy to provide it afterwards.
Thank you, and I know the clerk will make notes of that and then follow up with a list. MLA Rankin, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so 100% of the funding in that program, coupon program, goes to local farmers and producers in 37 communities across the province. And I think what happened was at year end, which typically happens, is there's money that the government can spend as one time. The challenge with organizations like this is now they're actually getting less this fiscal year than they did last fiscal year because of that one-time bump. And so the longevity and the strength of the program is hampered by not having that funding. And so it's important that we support local food producers, I think, in this time. And I want to ask, will CCTH commit to working with other departments, such as Department of Agriculture, to ensure that the entire government is doing everything they can to support local producers?
Deputy Minister Shore.
Thanks again, and thank you for that question. We absolutely are committed to working with. We work with most departments. We have a lot of interaction with the Department of Growth and Opportunities. We have lots of interaction with Labor Skills and Immigration, but there are many departments that we work with, and we are absolutely committed, as I said, to looking at the issue of food security. As I mentioned earlier, it's a question that it's something that we take very, very seriously, and absolutely, we're committed to trying to find ways to help Nova Scotians in that area, for sure.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you for the answer. And I have a question around a festival that I hear is being organized by a group that is called the Highland Games of Halifax. I don't know if you heard about that, but it is a revitalization of a previous Highland Games that was very popular in the downtown area. So it is a festival, and I'm not sure if you have the information in terms of what you provide to, I think Antigonish Highland Games is probably the most popular in the province, certainly the oldest. They like to talk about that and the history behind it, but would the Halifax Highland Games be eligible for funding under the festival programs? And is there because they'd like to have this in the next year, not this year, but next summer, is there room in the budget, and how would the process work for that group that's working on a Halifax Highland Games, which would be a major event?
Deputy Minister Shore.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, we're always open to applications to come in. I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with that one in particular. I'm not sure if we've received an application from that particular group.
I'd have to concur.
Yeah. However, regardless, we always are open to applications, and I think the thing that I would recommend is to ask event organizers to reach out to department staff to discuss the application for the event. So we at Susan staff, the events team is open to working with any organization that comes to us, and so they just have to reach out there. The person that I'd recommend that they speak to is Paul Forrest. He's the director of events, and if they just give him a call, and we would work with any applicant. Depending on the scale, so give them a call, and then we find the appropriate place for them. Yep.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And related to the year-end spending, the additional appropriations that we see go through frequently and at escalating scale, in February of 2025, there was 17 million that were described as primarily due to increase in various community grants. Can you give us any more clarity about what this spending is used for, the 17 million?
Deputy Shore.
So at the end of the year, there are opportunities through, from time to time, there are opportunities through additional appropriations for us to make additional investments into a number of different programs. In certain cases, we made reference earlier to the high volume of applications that we receive to many of our programs. Sometimes when we do those evaluations, those applications can kind of fall into generally three sort of categories. One is that we can fund the application and we have the resources for that. So in other words, this is a good application. And it has all of the pieces that are needed to support it. Sometimes we have good applications that we just don't have the funding to support. And then there are other applications that just don't make the cut. At the end of the day, they fall short in one of the criteria for one reason or another. So we always have a list of organizations that have been fully evaluated, but we just don't have we don't have the funding for it. From time to time, there's an opportunity for us in the year, sometimes at the end of the year, we have access to additional funding. And typically what we do is we go back to those grants there that we have evaluated, all of them we've evaluated, and basically try to increase the number of applications that can receive funding. That crosses a number of different programs. So in certain circumstances, it can be arts funding, it could be culture funding, it can be infrastructure funding, it can be funding to fund rinks, it can be funding to fund festivals. It can be all manner of so business accessibility, so accessibility grants, community accessibility grants. So we take a look at all of those grants and we try and determine how can we best use the money that's there that we might have available. So I'm sorry, I missed the number specifically. You were asking a specific number, was it, or?
MLA Rankin.
17 million was actually spent for additional appropriations. So the question's really around like process and determination of how that gets spent.
Oh, Deputy Shore, not yet, right?
Not yet, not yet. Yeah, not ever, maybe. That's the process. Sorry, that's the process. The process that we have, is that we take a look at the applications. They've all been evaluated. They've all been evaluated during the year, and we rank them. So we have lists of those and rank them through. And then if there's an opportunity to go back at the end of the year or through the year, for that matter, we go back and take a look at the highest ranking ones again. Yeah.
MLA Rankin with about 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Yeah, and so you evaluate them, but what happens after the fact? So the AG has identified that many grants, once the money's out the door, there's very little control over what's spent. So what controls do you have in place to ensure the grant funding is being used responsibly for its intended purpose?
Deputy Minister Shore.
The control typically that we have, especially for, again, it really depends on the nature of the grant, of what grant we're talking about. In certain cases, especially on infrastructure grants, there are holdbacks that we have. So there's a percentage of the grant that we don't allocate out because in all cases, there has to be reporting back to us about the progress of the grant itself. So in an infrastructure grant, for instance, we have holdbacks that we basically hold on to, and we need to get updates through the life of the project and make sure that milestones are being reached appropriately. In terms of smaller grants, we always require that there be a final report given to us in terms of reporting what that is. You can imagine that in Nova Scotia, there are a large number of organizations, most of whom we know. There aren't that many organizations that come to us that we don't have a relationship in one manner or other. So they usually have a track record with us. If they come to us and for some reason, the money isn't being used the way it's supposed to be used, we have the ability in our terms and conditions to ask for the money back. Which we can do at any time. That's in our terms and conditions. On top of that, if we're not satisfied with the final report, we can basically say to that organization, listen, we're not receiving any more. You're not able to apply to any more programs, so you can't come back to us ever again. So there are a couple of different levers that we can use in terms of finding out, like addressing an area where there's a problem. In certain circumstances, we also have an ability to, if needed, to instigate an investigation as well into if we thought there was some wrongdoing.
Order, please. The time for the Liberal caucus has elapsed. And we will move to the PC caucus for 20 minutes. And I believe we will begin with MLA Timmins.
And thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate this. In Victoria Lakes, of course, we have a lot of events, and you did mention the Celtic Colours, and that's throughout, of course, Cape Breton. And over the years, we've seen great benefits because of that. Each major event hosted in Nova Scotia generates money being spent in the local community on food, accommodations, etc. Can you share with the committee the investments these festivals make in the communities?
Deputy Shore, please.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. So are you interested in the, sorry, can you just repeat the question again? Sorry.
MLA Timmins, please.
On the impact that generates being spent in the local community on the food accommodations, is there some research that has been done to show the impact of that?
Deputy Shore.
Thank you. I just misheard. Yes, absolutely. So when there's a large-scale event or even smaller events, we often afterwards do economic impact studies as the event is going on and generate economic impact reports afterwards. I'll give you a couple of examples of some of the large-scale ones. So, for instance,
I mentioned earlier the World Junior Hockey Championship, which was very, very successful in 2023. That was a $2 million investment on behalf of the province from our department, and there was an $11 million economic impact generated from that event. The North American Indigenous Games would be another one that was a very large-scale, very highly successful event for Nova Scotia. $6 million investment on behalf of the province, a $29 million economic impact for the province of Nova Scotia. Similarly, you'll probably remember the Juno Awards were here not that long ago. Again, that was a $1 million investment on behalf of the province and a $4.7 million economic impact. Each one, and I'll give you one more because I'm just going to ramble on numbers all day long, but basically, I'll give you two more. So the Congrès Mondial was another one that was highly, highly successful in Southwest Nova Scotia last summer. $3.35 million investment for an $8.2 million return in that part of the province, which was phenomenal, really. And I think on top of the economic impact, you had this tremendous sort of sense of pride of place and celebration, which was really quite significant. So we know that with all of our events, it's an important part of the economic impact side of it is a very important part of what we do, but it's not the only part of what we can do. But those are some examples.
MLA Timmins.
Thank you very much. Every 2 years, CCETH conducts the Nova Scotia Cultural Survey to understand how Nova Scotians value and participation in the cultural areas. What did you learn from the 2024 survey about the value and the participation in the festival and events?
Deputy Shore.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, so the culture survey is something that we started a number of years ago to really get a sense of how Nova Scotians feel about culture and the impact and participation. So this past year in 2024, in July, I should say, we did the survey again, and there were 1,800 replies to the survey, which is a significant number. The responses to the survey demonstrated the importance of and value of festivals and events for Nova Scotians. So I'll give you a couple of statistics. 67% of the respondents said that they had attended a festival or event in the past year, which is quite significant in Nova Scotia. The top reasons that they gave for participation, supporting the local community, was 75% of respondents said that was the reason that they went. 46% said that they have a positive impact on them personally. 40% said they attended to preserve and celebrate culture. 33% said that they felt more connected with others attending a festival. And 30% made reference to the fact that they wanted to support family or friends. So in addition to that, just under 2/3 of respondents believed it would be important for their community to host a major festival or culturally related event. So by those metrics, we can kind of understand that that festivals and events play an important part in the lives of Nova Scotians for a multitude of reasons. Pride of place is a big one, but I think for us, the one that I find quite interesting is the connectedness that people feel. They find an area of connectivity, they connect with each other, they connect with their community. And the other piece that I just want to briefly touch on is I also believe that there is an element here of education, especially for young people. I think young people have the ability to learn about their communities, to learn about the heritage of their communities, and get involved in volunteerism. So volunteerism is a big part of it as well.
MLA Timmins.
Thank you very much. Major events require collaboration with multiple partners. I know in our area, the municipality provides some funding towards some festival events as well. How does CCETH work with the partners to support the festivals and community events?
Ms. Jeffries, please.
Thank you for the question. As you can imagine, the work involved in attracting events or hosting events is not something that our department does alone. So we work collaboratively with a number of different organizations. We work with the municipalities to understand what they're doing to attract events to a community, and also to understand what the capacity of a community would be and what kind of fit a festival would have in a particular community. We also work with, obviously, the regional tourism organizations. We work with our own tourism division in a big way. We meet regularly with our tourism division to talk about major events and festival events attraction. Not-for-profit organizations, from a major event hosting perspective, a lot of the bid work that we do, we work in concert with provincial sport organizations or national sport organizations, other levels of funding. So our federal partners, municipal partners play a key role. Decisions that are being made around major event hosting are made collaboratively with those organizations. The bid documents are prepared in a variety of ways. They could be prepared by a sport organization looking to do it with our help, or it could be something that's prepared by a municipality. On the community festival side of things, obviously, local organizations, we work with local organizations who may want to bring a festival to their community or start a new festival. So we work with them to understand from a capacity perspective. Our team as well, with Events Nova Scotia, we have a regional representation in Sydney. We're there as a resource to help them to actually develop an event. We have tools that are made available. A toolkit actually exists for any community that wants to start a festival from scratch. We have a how-to guide to help them to understand what needs to be done. And so we also work as well on the tourism side, and I can elaborate on that if you'd like. There's so many different resources available to understand once a festival's decided to happen, how they can help market it and draw visitors. And so all aspects of the tourism attraction is supported through our tourism division as well. So creating digital assets so they can market on novascotia.com. Understanding what the visitor wants is an important part of developing a festival. So our team at Tourism Division helps to understand what is motivating travelers to a particular region. And we also have lots of support available from existing festivals and their experiences in developing festivals and how they attract and market. And so they collaborate together a lot with various festivals across the province. So there's lots of resources and partnerships available. I guess the bottom line is we'll work with anybody who would want to work with us to help either start a festival, build a festival, expand a festival. So we're very open to working with a number of different organizations to make that happen and make it and help them be successful.
Emily Timmins.
Thank you very much. I won't take up too much time because I know my colleagues want to ask a few questions as well. But I want to really thank you on the grant finder. In my past as being an assistant to the previous MLA, we've really promoted that within the community, and they are the community is very appreciative of it. And also the data for the survey, would that be online as well for
Deputy Shore.
Yes. Well, I think we make that public. Yeah. So we'll make that available for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Emily Timmins.
Thank you very much. And I'll pass it on to my colleague.
Okay. MLA Outfit, please.
Thank you very much. And as I do at every one of these meetings, I learn something, and I enjoy learning. So thank you. I've learned this morning. I've served on grants committees in the past at the municipality, and what you do is very important, but it is not easy. There's always lots of good applications and never enough money, and things do happen. But thank you for doing that. And I suspect Paul's doing a good job with you. He came from HRM and did a good job there as well. So good morning, Paul. In 2018, the department released a strategy, and I'd like to just get a little update on the areas, the focus areas of the strategy, and just a little update on how the implementation's going. Thanks.
Deputy Shore, please.
Thanks for the question. And in 2018, we introduced Nova Scotia's first events strategy. It really, I think it was a bit of a milestone for us because, as I made reference to before, without connecting a kind of overall strategy, the danger in especially even large-scale events is that you kind of have these one-offs. You have like a one-off piece. In my opening remarks, I spoke a little bit about the various elements that are important in terms of what events are, the economic impact, the community well-being, but we also like that there needs to be a strategy behind that. So when you're investing significant dollars in sort of capital improvements on places, you want to make sure that the investment that you've made in that entity continues to return on investment later on. So the strategy itself links us to that. So everything becomes as intentional as you possibly can, and that's why the strategy is really important. It kind of lays out a number of important pillars in terms of what kind of events and what kind of education and collaboration and relationships that we engage in. As Susan made reference to, we work with municipalities, we work with destination marketing organizations, we work with our tourism division, we work with individual Nova Scotians in terms of making sure that their events are successful. We're actually now in the process of kind of refreshing that strategy. As I mentioned, it was done in 2018. We think it's time not to fundamentally change it because its fundamental concepts are sound, but with the team right now is actually working on updating it a little bit. But part of that strategy was all about identifying different kinds of events, identifying large-scale events that are appropriate, that make sense for Nova Scotia to host, because it's in the character either of the province or it speaks to an element of society that we want to enhance. Certainly, as I've always mentioned, the economic impact is big. The tourism impact is another component of that. But then we're also looking at trying to help communities across Nova Scotia improve their capacity to host events. So a big part of the strategy is also an educational component. The team hosts webinars and workshops for any organizer in any part of the province who wants to kind of up their skill level a little bit. Additionally, we try very hard to create a collaboration and an awareness of what kind of events are going where. So when there are multiple, organizations that might want to attract an event to their part of the province, it doesn't make sense for us to be competing with each other for the same event. So we try very hard to make sure that the communication is good. If Liverpool, wants to host an event and Truro wants to host the same event, well, let's not compete with each other and let's figure a way to kind of collaborate there. The strategy helps us in terms of identifying events and in terms of identifying places where those events could go and then building capacity in there. And as I said before, we're working right now at updating the elements, the pillars of that Nova Scotia event strategy.
MLA Outhead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not surprised. I'm glad to hear that it's going well, but also that you're doing another update. And of course, as the province continues to grow and we become more diverse, that's going to give you more challenges, but also some incredible opportunities, I would think, too, for new events to try and support. You mentioned about community events and community wellness, which is, I think, I absolutely agree with and is so important. But these festivals also play a role in attracting folks to the province or back to the province. So just tell me a little bit how that overlap is. So it's good for the community, the wellness, but it also does help tourism as well. So just any thoughts on that?
Deputy Shore?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for the question. So as I said before, there's a wide range of events and cultural performances, sporting competitions, festivals, food events. They cater to diverse interests. There's lots of different entity and organizations. And these events also provide, tourists with a kind of with a memorable experience. for the large part. I made reference earlier to there's the kind of large-scale event that people sometimes specifically travel here when people know that there's a sale GP or that there is a stampede or a Juno Award, for example, or a hockey event. They come to the province because that's what drives them to the province. But just as important are having a full range of activities throughout the year that people can attend to when they're here. So sometimes people don't always attend, come for a specific festival. They come to Nova Scotia because it's a great place to come to. But really, when they're here, we need something for them to do. And that's often where you see the smaller festival and the impact of the smaller festival. You think about the Devour Festival in Wolfville, and you think about all kinds of ones right across the province. It takes a long time to kind of put those pieces together. But again, it's something as well that we're conscious of because we are very conscious of looking at what is the traditional tourism season in Nova Scotia and extending that season. But we know that that's, all of those events are not only important to the local community and the local participants there, but also to the people that might come from the outside.
I recognize MLA Taggart with 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I just, I've got a couple questions here. Before I start, I really want to say thank you, I think, and congratulations, in the work that you folks have done in the Nova Scotia Stampede to sort of really revive that facility there, in my view. I mean, there's been lots of work going on it, but you mentioned in a couple different conversations, you talked about strategic investments and improving capacity to host events. And I just think that the investment in that Stampede is going to pay huge dividends, as well as investment in the in the ability for that facility to host the future events. So, you spoke about, and I'm sure we'll go back to this in our next round here, but you spoke a little bit about the variety of tools, like the grant finder and that kind of things for folks to be able, communities to find grants. But what can you give us a little insight into how the province promotes these events, like through tourism marketing and that sort of thing, these large events?
I recognize Deputy Shore.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important component of what we do. So our tourism division, has a number of programs, not only largely in place to promote the province itself and the activities in the province, but they have programs that are specifically geared to helping organizations promote their own event. There are a number of programs that are in place, like the Tourism Digital Assistance Program, the Emerging Destinations Program, Digital Content Marketing Program. So events like, the Lunenburg Dock Fest, for example.
Order. Sorry, the first round of questions is complete. We'll move to the second round. It'll be 16 minutes per caucus. We'll start with the NDP Caucus. I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this discussion so far. I just have a couple of questions. My first one is about arts infrastructure. So in the department, we have a fund that is like a community facilities fund. A rink might apply for money, or a community center for improvements. But we don't really see the arts community or cultural community using that fund. And yet we know that our art spaces have sort of infrastructure needs. So I'll just use the example of the Bus Stop Theatre. The province put a lot of money into that, making that the amazing space it is, but it will have ongoing maintenance issues, as any building does. But there doesn't seem to be a pocket of money to apply for, you know, $20,000 to fix the roof or put new siding on or something like that. Wondering if one of you could speak about that, about what work might be doing. I know that you've heard about this issue, and I just want to get an update on where things might be, and if that is, if you're looking at making a fund specifically for arts and culture spaces.
I recognize Deputy Shore.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. That's really an important one. Technically speaking, the Communities Facility Improvement Program, which exists, which is a $50,000, I think there's a max of $50,000 in that one. Arts and cultural organizations are eligible to apply to that program. I will say it's a very popular program, so we receive a lot of applications for it. That is, there is a pot of money available for that range that you were speaking about there. Typically, the infrastructure tends to be a higher order of magnitude in terms of when people are coming. Like, for example, at the bus stop theater that you made reference to, you know, when you're building a building, you're in the, you're in the $1 million range or millions of dollars of funding. So we tend to deal with those requests a little bit differently. They come in, typically we kind of look at who are the partners in place. I mean, it's a much more, so it's a very robust process that we have. That usually we look at partners like, is the federal government there? Is the municipal government there? Does the organization itself have money? And that certainly was the case with the bus stop. It's one of the reasons why we made the investment there. But there are other organizations as well across the province. We've made sort of significant investments in Mulgrave Road Theatre at the Roadhouse. We've made significant investments in Mermaid Theatre in Windsor, Theatre Bedeck in Cape Breton, Stan Rogers Festival, Festival Annie Ganesh, Neptune Theatre, Chester, all of them. We've made investments in those ones. They tend to be the initial kind of big one. But to your point, the smaller ones, like I said, the $20,000, $30,000 range, if it's specifically about the building itself, they can apply to CFIP. If it's an accessibility grant, they can apply in through our community accessibility fund, so they can actually receive some funding to make those kinds of investments.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you. Yeah, but to your point, it's a popular fund, and as many funds are in your department, because it's important. And so, there's a finite amount of money, and there's lots of people who don't access the grants or lots of organizations because the money runs out. I remember sitting on a jury years and years ago where we listed all the grants or all the applications in order, and then we're told you have $10,000 to spread amongst all of these applications, which was like devastating, as seeing all the requests. So my question then is, how do you ask for more money? Not an organization, but the department. So when you go to Treasury every year with your budget request, do you ask for more money every year and say, look, this department is serving all of these organizations, these people, these communities. We've heard so much about the impact on community today, health and wellness, social infrastructure, or social inclusion. We had this much requested money, this much went out the door, therefore this year we would like this much. Is that the way it works, or how can you explain that process?
I recognize Deputy Shore.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really great question. So, yes, basically the short answer is, I think for a little context, I want to say that we do our best in the department throughout the year to kind of maximize the dollars that go out into community. Ever since I started in this department, the culture within the department, and it's one that I continue to foster now in this role as deputy, is, and I was always very impressed by it, all of the staff
When it comes to the end of the year and our budget spending, they are wringing every last penny out of every couch in the department. Like, they're going everywhere to find it and to spend it and to put it into the hands of community. So number one, you know, we try to maximize every dollar that we have in our budget. And if there for whatever reason is a program that didn't spend all of its money, well, we make sure that that money goes out, like wherever it goes. So those priorities are decided internally with, obviously, under a certain threshold with the minister and with our executive team. We try to identify the need that's there. But yes, we identify every year. We identify a list of priorities during the budget process. We submit our budget ask during the year. And that goes into the process of determining what the budget, what the ultimate budget is. But we identify what are the department needs, where we would like to see spending go, and submit that into that process.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
I really want to ask you how that's received, but I'm not going to, because I think we all understand that when the budget comes out. So I just want to ask about libraries for a second. So libraries are incredibly important as they bring community members together to grow and learn, and more, especially in the affordability crisis that we find ourselves in, libraries become real, true community hubs. It's like in the library in Dartmouth North, I mean, literally feeds the kids from the junior high school 3 days a week when it's not closed because of sewage problems. But, you know, normally there's a lot going on, and that's in the middle of a city. So I can imagine what, you know, in more rural areas, the role that the library has in the community. But recently, Nova Scotia Libraries requested $1.6 million in emergency funding from the province to avoid reducing operating hours, which would be a real shame. What stage is the department at in terms of reviewing that request? And what stage is the department at in reviewing the overall funding formula for libraries? Can you tell us if there will be an increase going forward?
I recognize Deputy Shore.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great question. So we, the Nova Scotia Library, so the department, excuse me, provides operating funding to the libraries, the regional library system in Nova Scotia. It's somewhere in the magnitude of about $16 million. Plus minus. And there's a very specific formula that's used to calculate that amount, how it goes out to the 9 different regional library systems in the province. Last year, so that agreement had been in place for a number of years, and last year we were involved in a very thorough review of the funding formula. We sat for a number of months in a very collaborative working committee. It's called the Library Funding Review Committee. I happen to chair that committee. And where we worked with representatives, regional councillors from various municipalities and representatives from each of the library systems, as well as representatives from Coral, which is the Council of Regional Libraries, to identify what are the needs that were there. And they did a really phenomenal job of kind of laying out the full breadth, as you've described it, what a library does, which is, libraries are phenomenal. Last year, we provided $800,000 in what we called bridge funding, and previous to that, we provided previous years to that we provided about $500,000 in bridge funding as we were trying to arrive at this formula. That work is ongoing, so it as evidenced in the budget. There was not in the budget an increase to libraries. It remained the same. However, I will say we're actively speaking with all of our colleagues in other departments as well. And we're looking at, we've received that application for the $1.6 million, and it's currently under review. And there are discussions right now about how we move forward. So I can't commit to anything at this point, but I can tell you that there are some very active conversations going on.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you. And so it's ongoing. Do you know, in terms of the funding formula discussion, when we will know, like when that will come to an end and there'll be a resolve?
I recognize Deputy Shore.
I don't have an answer for that right now. I can tell you that, as I said, the funding formula, looking at a solution to the funding issue that they've identified, all of that is in conversation right now. All of that is in play right now as we speak.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Chandra?
We have,
No, 5 minutes.
5
okay.
minutes.
Well, maybe I'll just ask one more question, and that will give my colleague down the row a heads up. But I'll ask about art galleries. So, as you know, art galleries are also asking for increased provincial funding to help support their operations. Maintenance of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia is becoming really costly. And a challenge to keep up with. Does the department have an update on the plans to create a new home for the Nova Scotia Art Gallery, or Art Gallery of Nova Scotia?
I recognize Deputy Shore.
So, as you know, the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia is a Crown corporation, is Crown as part of our department at CCTH. A number of years ago, there was a plan to put in place to kind of build a new gallery down on the waterfront. Plans for that gallery were put on hold because of cost escalation. At this point, I don't have an update about a decision on whether or not that's moving forward. I know that if you just take a look at the cost of any kind of renovation, and in fact, we've experienced this in our other infrastructure grants, the cost of building things is just going up and up and up. So there's no question that it's a challenge. We've provided, in the last couple of years, some additional funding to the AGNS to address issues they're experiencing in the building that they're in. I think there was a new elevator system that was put in. There's some new security features that were put in. I think there was work on windows and work on the roof, because obviously we need to make sure that we're protecting the asset, the work inside. But right now, as far as I know, I'm not aware of any plan just yet. But we do recognize the importance of having an appropriate facility for the AGNS, because we think that it's a tremendous asset to the province itself. But I don't have an update in terms of any new build.
I recognize MLA Hamid.
Thank you very much. So last year, the Premier skipped the Halifax Pride Parade because of security concerns. Has the department had any conversations with Pride Parade organizers this year to ensure that these events are safe spaces for everyone, regardless of who they are, who want to attend to show their support for the community?
Deputy Minister Shore?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, we're just trying to clarify a point. We have obviously a strong relationship with the organizers of Pride. I know that the entity itself has experienced some changes. There's been a little bit of variation in terms of what's happening there. We work with them. We have worked with them, as we do with many festivals, on security plans. So security plans are part of what people can, when they apply for funding from us, that's something that we can work with them on, and to ensure that security is in place. But at this point, I don't really have, there isn't really an update that we have on this year's festival.
MLA Hamid?
The security concerns with Halifax Pride are not a one-off event. We've seen an increase in vandalized businesses being vandalized and hate symbols being plastered in public spaces all along the South Shore. Members of the 2S LGBTQIA community face security threats on an ongoing basis. Has the department had discussions with the community to better understand what type of support could be provided, not just at Pride parades, but also beyond that?
Deputy Minister Shore?
Yes. So the events that took place in Vancouver not that long ago are certainly indicative of the vulnerability that certain festivals have, especially when people want to take advantage. It's kind of contrary to what a whole festival is about, right? So we have, similarly, there was an incident, I don't know if you remember, last year in Africville, at the festival in Africville. So our team at the African Nova Scotian Affairs, which is an office of the department, reached out, went to after the event, went to organizers, spoke with them about the security plans, linked in the Halifax Regional Police. There was consultation done. There was a kind of a revisioning of security practices that took place.
Order, please. I'm sorry, I have to cut it off there. The time for the NDP has elapsed, and we'll move on to the Liberal Caucus with 16 minutes. So I recognize Emily Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to talk about tourism. You mentioned in your intro that there was $3.5 billion in revenue in the last year, and that's positive. But we had a goal over 10 years ago from the Ivany report of $4 billion of revenue to grow our tourism industry to. And I know the government has implied that they're not really following the Ivany report, and the information's no longer online in terms of a tracking of this. But I would expect with an industry so important to Nova Scotians and the impact on the economy that the department tasked with growing the tourism sector has some kind of a stretch goal in mind. And so I want to ask if $4 billion is still in sight, and does the department think that we will hit this goal of $4 billion?
Deputy Minister Shore.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Tourism is certainly important to us and to our mandate. It's part of our department. It's a significant economic driver, but I think that Ivany report number is, I think it is, as you mentioned, is about 10 years old. It's not specifically a metric that we use particularly now. It's not like that's the goal. Our goal is to increase tourists and tourism visitation. 3.5 billion is certainly a lot closer, closer to that old goal as it was before. But again, I don't think it's something that we want to hold ourselves to. We want to increase the number, and there are a number of things that we're doing in terms of trying to enhance the kind of impact of our marketing activities. We know, for example, this year that with things that are going on south of the border, that many Canadians are in fact deciding not to travel to the United States. They're actually looking at traveling, just keep travel within Canada. We have some significant, and in fact, 87% of our visitors to Nova Scotia come from the rest of Canada. So we really try to maximize our investment by identifying the markets that make most sense to us. Canada is a very important one. Atlantic Canada is an important one, as well as Ontario. And we've recently enhanced our marketing activities in Calgary, in Alberta. So that's a more recent one. You don't enter into a marketing activity like once or twice. It's a commitment that you need to make. You need it to be recurring. So we are enhancing our activities this summer, specifically in Ontario and in Calgary, because we believe there's an opportunity here to attract more Canadians. That's not to say we're not marketing to the United States. It's about 7% of our visitorship is American. So we're continuing that press, particularly in northeastern United States. That's kind of our main market. But you will also notice, if you look at the tourism statistics, that we've seen an increased number of visitors come to Nova Scotia by air. And we have some, the recent announcement of some direct flights, particularly from WestJet, opening up some new areas. Those are ones that we're also looking to take advantage of, because it's a high value visitor when they travel by air, and we're seeing that number increase. So we're kind of looking at it on a number of different fronts to kind of generally increase tourism. Certainly is a goal of ours. The $4 billion is not a hard metric that we're using.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just think that goals are important because, as they say, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. But I will ask the question. You mentioned that you are enhancing tourism initiatives, but yet the tourism budget has been frozen. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I just want to ask the question, is the department concerned that with a lack of increase to support growing the tourism sector with a frozen budget?
Deputy Shore, please.
So the budget, you're right. The budget for tourism in this year's budget remains the same as it was in previous years. That doesn't mean that within that budget that we can reallocate to a certain degree. We take a look at how the budget is spent in certain areas, and we can move smaller amounts of money around into areas that we think have the most impact, which is I made reference to the Ontario one and the Calgary in particular. So it's kind of a rebalancing. We always have to work with the resources that we are being given. There are a lot of as we made reference to a little bit earlier in the questions that I answered earlier, there's always a high demand for resources across the board. There's a high demand, from our department, but from every department. So there's a lot of need out there. We're trying to maximize the budget that we have to the best of our ability. And we do that by trying to take advantage internally. When there hasn't been a change to the budget, internally, how can we maximize what we think is working best? So we want to really take advantage of that piece. And I think in this given year, it's a really strong strategy because all of our metrics from Destination Canada and other sources that we work with are indicating that Canadians are traveling within the country, and we want to maximize that piece. So those metrics are very important to us.
MLA Rankin?
Thank you. And one other item in the budget that caught my attention, an area that I focus on a lot, is around recreation, so sport and recreation. And it appears that the funding for sport and recreation is actually being reduced by $5 million compared to what was spent last year. And I just want to ask the question if you can tell us what programs will that impact?
Deputy Minister Shore.
That's something that I'm going to have to get back to you on. Absolutely, I don't. I'll have to double check on that one. I don't see necessarily a $5 million reduction in that budget, but let me double check, and I'll get back to you.
Thank you. MLA Rankin, please.
Okay, that's great. If I could get that in writing for the committee, as well as the previous question earlier on nourishing communities, that would be fantastic. And I'm actually going to cede the rest of my time to the member for Fairview-Clayton Park.
MLA Hamid, please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with a question regarding, funding that's not approved. So I've heard from an organization that Fairview Farmers Market, when applying for funding, same funding that they had received the previous year, the following year, they were told that this is no longer innovative because you've done this before, and so we're not able to get that funding. For the Fairview Farmers Market and any other sort of similar program, like that doesn't just, bring people together, but it also introduces people to local businesses, and it probably increases businesses to them. So when something like that happens, do you find an alternative? Do you help them find an alternative? What happens there for, a program that's quite important to a community?
Deputy Minister Shore.
Thanks for the question. It's a really important one because I think, across the board, outside of that specific example, across the board, we do have a high volume of grants that come to us, and not all of them are successful. It's hard to speak to the specific one that I don't know the specifics about that particular one, because when I made reference earlier to, project funding versus operating funding, the project funding piece is really like a one-time sort of event. It's often given to an organization for a very specific reason at a given time. for many reasons that, you know, if they come back to that grant program again in a subsequent year, there could be other reasons why the grant is they're not successful in that application. That being said, one of the strengths of our department is the relationships that we hold with community members and community organizations. And when grants are not successful, we do our best to follow up with the organization, give them an appropriate reason, like here's the reason why it wasn't successful, and in fact work with them on subsequent years to kind of make a stronger application. Sometimes that's a question of helping them to focus on their own messaging. Sometimes it's an adjustment that's made in terms of the vision of what the grant is or what they're trying to achieve with the grant. But there is that support given. So many of our program officers that kind of manage our grant programs for us always work with organizations, especially ones that are not successful, to kind of hone and refine the application again. The other thing that we do is we have internally in our department a grants committee, and that's all of our grants program officers who get together. They review internal systems, but they all talk to each other. And one of the things that they do is they sometimes say, hey, there's a grant that comes from a certain organization. We weren't able to help them in this particular program. Is there a fit perhaps in another program? And those discussions happen all the time. And when there's an area, if we can do that, then it's absolutely something that we do.
MLA Hamid?
Thank you very much. I'd like to jump back to a number that was previously mentioned, the 1.2 million for food access. Just wondering, you know, from my previous experience, I mean, working in nonprofit, I've seen $2 million in emergency food funding go in about 2 days. So how did that 1.2 million, how was that decided? Yeah, how was that decided?
Deputy Minister Shore?
So we can provide for you, what I'll do is I'll send you the breakdown specifically. It wasn't part of this package of information that we had sent to you because that wasn't requested, but we can give you a complete breakdown of the 1.2 million and who it went to and the amounts. So we'll provide that as additional information for you. You can see it. Yep.
MLA Hamid?
Thank you very much. So regarding the operating grants, so you mentioned that those typically go out to organizations that would have had previously some kind of relationship or have previously applied and been successful in getting funding from CCTH. But again, working in nonprofit, knowing that a lot of times it's the smaller ones that really need that help and might not be, you know, might not have capacity. Some organizations don't even have people whose job is specifically to look and apply for grants, even though it is a full-time job. And so are you looking into expanding that at all, or maybe changing maybe the eligibility to remove some of the barriers for the smaller organizations with less capacity?
Ms. Jeffries, please.
Thank you very much for the question. I think earlier, in response to a question around operating assistance, we were fortunate to get an increase in the operating budget 2 years ago of about $4.5 million. And along with that, we undertook a review of the operating assistance programs. There's several ways to apply for operating assistance in my division, and which includes Arts Nova Scotia. And so what we looked at is, you know, what are the barriers to applicants getting operating assistance? One of the basis of applying for operating does have a requirement that you would have had at least 2 project funds from the department. And so if we have someone come forward from an organization that has not had an experience or a project with the department, we will look at what it is that they're doing and direct them to a project fund to get them, you know, onboarded, if you will. And so the success of that would be to project funding, so that could take some time. Some of the project funding that they might ask for along the road to getting operating does help them with, facilitating, their operational expenses to some degree. And so once they've met that criteria, it is really important that we felt through the review that stay as a criteria. It just demonstrates, even at a very small level, that there's capacity to run a project or to run a program. As an organization that may be entirely volunteer run, it still takes some organizational capacity to do that. So that helps us to understand their makeup and their ability to launch into an operating assistance. And so what we did following the increased operating funding through Arts Nova Scotia and through CHD is we looked at how people can come in for operating assistance. We recognize that organizations need consistency in their funding over multiple years. So although we've always had this at CHD, we have a 3-year, multi-year commitment available to operating clients. And that's someone who has demonstrated through having project funding. And so they could apply for multi-year funding. Arts Nova Scotia specifically created a stream for 1-year organizations that can come in with very little experience in operating, but they can come into a 2-year stream that is really built for arts organizations that have low resources to operationalize what they're doing. So they recognized from an arts application perspective that was a definite need. And so we're in the 2nd year of that. So we'll know.
Please. I apologize. And I know that the deputy had a follow-up, but we'll have to wait and see if maybe you can put it in your closing remarks. We'll now move to the PC Caucus, and I recognize MLA Taggart, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, folks. There's been a lot of information here this morning. It's great stuff. So I represent a lot of small rural communities, and as I grew up as a child, that was a long time ago, but there used to be a lot of, almost every community, a little festival. Seems to have gone away. So I'm just wondering, where would we start, how can communities work with your development to secure support for existing, festivals, but more importantly to me, create new festivals and that sort of thing? Where would we start?
Deputy Minister Shore.
Thanks for the question. The place to start is with our Events Nova Scotia team. I mentioned earlier Paul Forrest and his team work with organizations and individuals from across the province, both, in terms of, helping them when they have existing festivals, but also the big thing is, of course, if there's an idea for a new festival, the best place to start is with that team, and you can direct them to whoever in your community to reach out to them specifically. There are a number of resources that they have from an educational point of view. There's webinars, there's printed information that they can give you to sort of direct you into the best way to think about the impact of an event that an event might have, and all the things you need to think about that go into it. In addition to that, they're also really, really great at sort of taking you through any applicant through spelling out what the guidelines are of various programs, what kind of money is available. In addition, depending on the size of the event, we're also able to connect them into other potential sources of funding that might be, depending on the size, like I said, a municipality, or if it was big enough, a federal government program as well. I think sometimes people are surprised by all the things they need to think about when they're putting something on. And the thing about that team is they know all the things you need to think about to put on such an event. We had a conversation earlier about security. So that's one in particular. You really need to have robust security plans and things like that. But our team is very, very knowledgeable and very well positioned to help anybody. Yep.
MLA Wong, please.
Thank you, Chair. This government has really made a lot of community investments in local infrastructure. I'm just wondering if you could give some examples. I know that my colleague MLA Taggart talked about the Nova Scotia Stampede, but some of the infrastructure investments that government has made throughout Nova Scotia, especially rural Nova Scotia, and the impact that it really has on the communities to be able to host major events.
Deputy Minister Shore, please.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to give you a couple examples that are kind of obvious that would support, you know, the infrastructure investments that we've made, and then I'd like to kind of point out a couple of things that might not be so obvious. So, you know, for example, I think we made reference to Stampede, and you know, we supported the purchase of bleachers there to kind of enhance that event and continue them. We made a significant investment in the Mariner Centre, you know, this past year. We've invested in the Canada Games Centre, like $8 million in the Canada Games Centre at Cape Breton University to be a hub for hockey for women and girls, and increase their capacity to host events and tournaments. One of the things that we do as well is we, you know, through our rink revitalization program, we invest in rinks, in upgrading rinks. Chillers, a chiller in a rink might not be something that you think is going to enhance the event or, you know, the capacity of that entity to do that, but it does. It means there's all kinds of sporting events that can take place in that arena at that given time. And the other one that I think is particularly interesting and a little unusual is we have a significant trail system in Nova Scotia that our community sports and recreation team supports, the trails and the trails initiatives. Those trails are used for all kinds of events throughout the province. The Rum Runners race in Lunenburg is a great example that takes place on the trail, on the Rum Runners Trail. But there are a number of different events that take place that utilize that infrastructure, sort of a trail infrastructure. So those are the kind of two examples of the kind of indirect one that you might not think directly outside of the ones that are pretty obvious, like the Mariner Centers and the Canada Games Centre.
MLA Wong?
You know, thank you for that. I really didn't know some of the indirect things that you talked about, so that's nice to know. I'm just going to talk a little bit about community events and festivals when they are hosted. What's done through your department in order to incorporate local vendors, local products, local catering, and those type of things for festivals? For example, my hometown is Digby. They have the Wharf Rat Rally. I try to get down on years when I can, so I'm just interested in what type of things that your department does to support local.
Deputy Minister Shore.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Certainly, you know, with the program in Nova Scotia Loyal at our colleagues at Opportunities and Growth, we work really closely with them on that piece. But in general, when we're working with an organization in a community, we really try to kind of make them aware of all of the opportunities that are there in terms of putting on the event. Wharf Rat Rally is a great example of that. We've been working with the organizers of that rally for a number of years to kind of enhance the event itself. And the offering of local product and using local businesses is something that we absolutely push them to try and do their best at, to maximize. It makes sense from a kind of economic point of view, because first of all, it's usually if there's a business that's in town that can deliver the product that you need, it makes sense to use that product. It's often cheaper to do that. But I think the other side of it is just in general, in the spirit of the Nova Scotia Loyal program, we want to encourage all events across the province to kind of make use of local produce, local product, because I think it just enhances the experience. So it's definitely something that we encourage when we work with local organizers. Yep.
MLA McLeod, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a quick follow-up question for that, because when we think of local products and festivals, my mind immediately goes to the beer and wine industry. So for a supported event through your department, are there any stipulations that event would have to follow to support local?
Deputy Minister Shore, please.
Thank you. There aren't stipulations in the specific, in the grant itself. So I should qualify. There are stipulations in the grant. There's lots of things that we hold people to account when they're putting on a festival. But those decisions that are being made in terms of what product to use and what's appropriate when, there's great variability in that. It depends on what part of the province that you're in. As I mentioned to MLA Wong, we encourage people to try and buy local product, but the character of the event, that really rests with the local organizers. It's really for a local host committee who kind of know best in their community what they want to offer. And so it's more a question, we really leave it to them to make those decisions. It's not something that we necessarily impose on them outside of a strong encouragement, let me put it that way, to buy local Nova Scotia product.
MLA McLeod, please.
Thank you. So timing is everything. And we know we have festivals at different times of the year. A winter carnival festival will probably happen at a different time than a lobster carnival. So my question is, what is the usual timeline for an organization to apply for and receive the funding? And are there wait times?
Ms. Jeffries?
Thanks for the question. From a community festival event perspective, the festival event program is an annual program that has a deadline, I believe mid-February. And so we, in advance of that deadline, will work with organizations that may want to apply. In some cases, consult with them on the application. Once the application comes in, I think I mentioned earlier today that it can be a very large number. I think this year we have 187, so there's some time that we have to take to assess those applications. So we'll assemble an internal assessment panel to look at the applications. We go through a scoring rubric to determine, eligibility, what criteria within the festival event program that they're meeting, and we make a determination on funding. So that process can take some time. Right now, we are, I think, about to go through approval process from that February 15th deadline, so we're within 60 days. That would be probably a general service delivery standard of within 60 days, depending on the program. And so once that happens, we forward a recommendation to our minister to advise our minister on what we're suggesting to fund. That once that's approved, we go through the process of preparing approval letters and terms and conditions letters, so that we have an automated process, obviously, through our grants management system to do that internally. So we endeavor to turn that around as quickly as possible. As you can imagine, we have festivals that are underway right now, or some that are starting later. So, in some cases, a festival may be waiting for their approval because their festival's early in the fiscal year, and other times they're getting word on the approval well in advance of their festival. So that particular program has a deadline. We also have another program that we didn't have an opportunity to mention today, but the Community Maui-Omi Fund is a program that it's about 3 years old now, and that supports community Maui-Omis in the province through the 13 Indigenous communities. When we first launched that program, we had a deadline and realized just the way that the timing of these festivals occurred, it was most beneficial to remove a deadline and have an open intake for that program. So in some cases, our programs are open at any time of the year for someone to come through at a time that suits them. Obviously, they need to work on their applications and submit their proposals or applications by a deadline, or in some cases well in advance of their festival, to give us time to review those, approve them, and then get the money into their bank accounts.
Emily McLeod, with 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the members here might agree that our constituency offices are a point of entry for a lot of these organizations. So on behalf of my constituency assistant, thank you for that grant finder website. It's really been helpful. Now, you just mentioned a scoring rubric. Okay, so I know there's a set pot of funds available. and there's a lot of applicants. Now, I assume the applications are ranked using the scoring rubric. I was just wondering if you could kind of describe that process and what kind of criteria are in that rubric, if it's population, if it's maybe departmental goals. Could you please describe that?
Ms. Jeffries?
Let me use the festival and event program as an example, because I think that's most appropriate to the community festivals we're talking about right now. And so, you know, from the onset is the project eligible? So if they're coming in for an element of support within a festival, so they may be looking for specifically marketing support as an example, they may be looking for advice to develop our sponsorship model is another example. So primarily we look at it as an eligible applicant. Is what they're asking for meet the criteria of the program? Okay, you check that box. And then you look at whether or not the application needs to be, you know, complete in the questions that we're asking them, which is a very brief application, I will say. It's what are you doing? When are you doing it? You know, what are your expectations as a result of receiving this funding, questions like that. So we would look to see that the application is complete. So that would be taken into account from a scoring perspective. We look at their budget. You know, is what their budget proposed realistic? Is it an amount that is appropriate for what they're looking for? So we would look at the budget to see that it is an appropriate budget. And what's in that budget is what is included in the budget and eligible expense under that program. So that's another piece of criteria. And, you know, from an overall perspective, the capacity to undertake what they say that they're going to do. You know, knowing that a lot of the applicants that come into that program are existing festivals. And so generational festivals, like there's some that have been long-standing, and there's others that are absolutely new, first time even learning about a festival. So, you know, you can imagine that what we get on our desks varies in terms of its completeness and you meeting the criteria. So all of those things collectively would be scored and ranked, as you mentioned. When it comes to allocating the money, you know, we do look obviously to see if an application is included in the recommendation, what have they asked for, and what are the eligible expenses that we can support. So there might be an adjustment based on some piece of that if you've asked for 5,000, we might give you 3. Well, there's something about that ask that might be in there that's ineligible. But we do also endeavor in a reasonably way to geographically and spread the money as far as we can.
Order, please. I'm sorry. The time has elapsed for asking questions. We have 4 minutes left in our meeting, and I would like to invite you to make closing remarks, but keep them within 3 minutes, please. Deputy Shore.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. I want to begin by just thanking all of you today for the opportunity for us to come and speak with you. We are a department, I hope it came across, we take what we do very, very seriously. I think there's an opportunity. We're a very outward-facing department. We're a department that's directly involved in the lives of many, many Nova Scotians, and I think it's something that we consider to be a great privilege. And something that we do our best to try and maximize the funding that we have and have the biggest possible impact. So I just mainly want to thank all of you today, and thank you for inviting us here today to speak with you. I just want to make one point of clarification, well under 3 minutes, Madam Chair, and that is MLA Rankin asked a question about a recreation funding cut. There have been no cuts to our department. Our departmental budget was not cut at all this year. He might be making reference to last year. There were some questions about earlier on about additional allocations. There was additional funding that was made available to us through the Department of Opportunities and Social Development, then known as Community Services. At year end, it was about $10 million. It was in and around food security and food and access to food insecurity. We worked together with that department to allocate the money out into community. But that was a one-time amount that we had. So it's possible that that's what MLA Rankin was looking at. We continue to do that work to kind of support and do the best we can to maximize the dollars that we do have, but there wasn't any cut to the department. Again, I just want to make that point, but again, thank you all for the opportunity to come and speak with you today.
And thank you both for coming. It's been a very good meeting with lots of information. So there's no committee business today. So our next meeting, we have two next week. As a reminder, May 28th and 29th. They're both in camera, and it's with the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation, and it's our training workshop. We also just want to make a note that there will be no meeting on May 21st due to the unavailability of a witness. And if there is no further business, then I will adjourn the meeting. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.